German U-boat Type 21 submarine. One of the last ones made by Germany in the Second World War. Highly successful submarine. But let's not worry about the history. Let's get into this. You can see that half of it is enclosed and half of it is open, showing the interior. Now the interior is all miniature pieces that you have to put together. And it comes with a little stand as well. Now I'm going to see if we can put this into my very first Atlantic seascape diorama and show this ship in action. In order to do that, I set myself the task. We're not going to use any resin pours on this. We're just going to use paint and aluminum foil. This is the finished Atlantic rough weather diorama. The left side, as you can see, is open, showing the internal parts of the boat. And the right hand side, which was enclosed, I did more foam effects. Of course, the foam effects are cotton wool together with some matte gel water effects on there. Now, no resin was used in this model. I used a foam board base, and then I built it up with some aluminum foil. I'll show you that in just a second. And then I used 2 shades of blue, and for the water near the surface, I used a surface green. And then it was covered with some gloss spray, and we had some foam effects on top there. So I'm just going to show you just a couple of things about the foil system that I used, and I'm also going to show you the paints that I used. Now, you can use Timara paints and put them through an airbrush, but you've got to thin those down, which I didn't do. I used airbrush paints throughout on this. So I've got a standard 4-foot square set of formula foam board. This is fairly dense. You got it from Home Depot. It's like $4 or $5 for a huge bit. You set the model at an angle and then mark it out where you're going to cut. So you cut it at just the right size. Then, of course, what I had to do is to go and cut this little section in half laterally, so it was half as thick. You have to use a saw or a knife for this. You can't use a hot cutter. So I ended up with a piece of foam board that's about 6 inches by 8 inches. It's about 10 inches in the diagonal. The boat itself is about 7 1/4 inches long, stem to stern. So it fit very nicely into that diagonal. Then draw an outline with a Sharpie on the rough cut foam. And it's a very long task to gouge and cut out the foam as best you can. It's not an easy job when it's dense foam like this. But I went a little deeper at the stern, which is to the rear of the boat, so the bows can rise up out of the water. Now, I have to admit that I've seen this by several YouTube experts using this particular foil method, so this is not something that I invented at all. First, I made little kitchen foil hills roughly parallel to where the waves were going to be. So as my boat was going to go bottom left to top right, I made sure the hills were kind of going left to right across the diagonal where the waves and the troughs would be. And they weren't too high and they weren't too low. Having glued all that down with liberal layers of PVA and water mix, I then put a sheet of aluminum foil all over the top, pressed down between the troughs and where the boat was going to be, of course, and then liberally covered that with 2 layers of watered down PVA glue, making sure each layer dried in the hot Texas sun between each layer. And that's probably the most important part. You can't go too quickly when you make the base. First, I used a surface primer over the whole of the sheet and followed that with a transparent base for good measure, just to give it a little bit of depth. Now, it's better to hand brush the primer as it can clog airbrushes. I then used 3 airbrush ready paints. One were the first was the marine blue for the deep water areas, and then an ultramarine blue that had to be transparent, give it a little bit of reflection down there, and then some emerald green for effect. You probably saw that emerald green showing up quite nicely in the finished model. Then I used a bit of 3D gloss gel over all of the wave area and some of the boat, because obviously there's water on the boat decks as well. And then I tried to use a bit of AK water foam on the wave tops. Now I did try some airbrushing to see if I could foam that up a little bit. Didn't seem to work too well. Got to learn how to do that a little better. Now when all of that was dry, I then added A couple of layers of clear gloss spray, that's the small can on the right from Hobby Lobby. And then, because I rifled through the wife's craft cupboard, I found some glitter blast sealer. Wow, it's great stuff. Added some of that to the whole of the model. And that was it.